but maybe a smaller group, that's okay. I'll go through things quick. Yeah, let's skip this. No news on the papers. No new papers. I mean, there is this our one paper, the mitochondrial group, that's been under review for a long time, but I think it's positive. We should hear some good things back soon after we already addressed a lot of comments from people. And yeah, no new updates other than people who are involved with Al in the case report. I think he set up a meeting to have sometime soon to go over this, some of the data that he's dumped on people. A lot of interesting data related to this one case report related with arthritis and different factors in this unique case for long COVID. All right, let's go into the recent news. So this one article, just going about talking about origins, which I don't try to focus on too much, but this article came out. I know it's been in the news. People have paid attention to the past few weeks again, unfortunately. But this one was interesting because some new data is starting to indicate that, or maybe indicate that potentially maybe these raccoon dogs, they're called, they look like this. They've been finding some data from the Wuhan markets from these creatures there that they were actually positive for COVID, and maybe some indications saying they could have been one of the carriers. But how did they get it, and where did they get it from? That's not no. But that's just interesting there. That doesn't change the fact that where we are at, but just origin story. So this preprint I thought was interesting, and I could relate with what we were just having the informal discussion earlier. But this preprint came out earlier this week, and it's talking. There's maybe the modeling group. I guess maybe it's here from the modeling group, but they basically ran some forecasting and predicting. The COVID-19 forecasting team is, I guess, a large group that does a lot of this stuff. They were looking at different scenarios and how potentially in the next months to come, depending on the scenario, what will be the outcome of daily infections, hospitalizations, and so on around the world, and deaths. So this is just a plot. I have a few plots. Again, this is a preprint, so take it with a grain of salt, as we do with all preprints. But the data seems, the modeling they've done seems pretty interesting. So what they've done first is they took the previous trends that were there from Delta, Omicron, and all the previous waves. They modeled and mapped they trained their models on the previous data that's available, in that era, and then made some predictions based on there. And they saw that indeed, their predictions that they made did match very well the trends that occurred previously. So using that, now they make additional scenarios for the months to come. So they did different categories. They did one saying, if there's no new variants, we stick with the variant we have, which is now, XBB.1.5, or some different variants of that, and Omicron, in different regions of the world. Some are BA.2, BA.1 still. But, if there's no new variants happening in different regions of the world, this is, they're talking about Europe, Africa, Americas, and so on, and, like Asian countries and so on. But the trends are showing that infections are basically either declining or steadying out depending on the region. No new hospital admissions, no new deaths. So according to their model, based on what previously has been seen, if there's no new variants, and this is kind of sort of what we're seeing right now, as you'll see in the numbers soon, this is what the trends that they predict, which would be very promising. I mean, I guess it'd be some good news for a change. If there's an Omicron-like variant that comes up now, meaning Omicron variant, meaning the original strain, but a new version of that, that pops up that will not be Omicron, but be like that caused the same kind of trends that we saw with the huge spike back, a year or so ago, or almost a year and a half ago now. They're predicting these trends by April. It'll go up depending on the regions of the world. Americas is like that, in our region, North America. And then, it'll follow the same trends as we've seen. Now, the Delta-like variant they're talking about, which was more caused, I think, more severe cases at point. They're saying not much change there according to the model. But then if there's a breakthrough Delta-like variant that is very different from what we've seen, again, And then the worst outcome is the Delta Cron, they're calling it, which is the one they'll say if there's, let's say, a recombinant version of Omicron Delta type variant that pops up, not necessarily that, but it's something that would be just as predicted to be just as virulent and immune evasive as that Delta Cron was supposed to be. So this is the different scenarios, and they have different plots in here, and they have to go over different ways of looking at this. But overall, there's just providing kind of a viewpoint or forecasting of what can possibly happen, in the months to come if these different scenarios occur. I guess right now we're in this first column, the new variant scenario, until a new variant might, as you'll see in the slides to come, if there's some new variants that might outcompete, where we're at XBB.1. So anyway, so this was an interesting preprint that people might be interested to read. Maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
Since we have time, maybe someone on the call, virologist, how frequent is it that new variants just keep coming up that extend the pandemic for years in viral infections? You take the Spanish flu, I think it was 3 years, and they took off the mask, they had a bad fourth year, and then it becomes endemic.
Yeah.
So those models that suggest if an Omicron variant came up, for instance, then you could have a tremendous spike like that, keep it going, or if you had a Delta-like variant. But how frequently has that happened with viral infections, that you get years of that kind of cycling and you stay in a pandemic-like mode? I'm just curious what people know.
Maybe Nydia. Yeah, Nydia. I always turn to you for this.
Sorry, Nydia.
No worries at all. I would think that we will continue to see new variants that will extend the pandemic as long as we see, as long as there is immune escape, and as long as the virus is not completely or very well adapted to us. And I think that's what we saw with Omicron, right? It came with 30 mutations and significant immune escape. If at some point with vaccines and natural infection, we reach a point where there is a herd immunity, the thing that everyone was trying to achieve, then it's likely that a new variant could emerge to surpass that immunity, that level of immunity.
And Nydia, has that happened X number of times with different viruses historically? That
Right. It does happen. Let's talk about influenza, seasonal influenza, right?
Okay.
Every year we have a new variant that dominates, and that's why we have to develop new vaccines every year. So it is
but we've managed that, so nobody talks about that as a
exactly.
pandemic.
People don't talk, but people now have a better appreciation of flu and the efforts that are done in terms of vaccination and so on. Now that COVID came around, so yeah, I think eventually we'll just have to continuously update vaccines for COVID to keep up with the escape of immunity.
Thank you.
And hopefully, eventually the vaccine debate will go away for, the controversy that people make out of it. Won't be an issue, just like the flu was, and now it isn't anymore because of COVID. But that's a whole other topic.
So out of curiosity, this preprint that you're speaking of, did they cross-validate with other viruses?
No,
did they cross-validate their predictions with other virus trends?
No, but that would be a good comment a reviewer should make if they're actually reviewing this paper.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, did they compare historical data with historical data? So, for example, did they use their model with early COVID data and then test their model with outcomes later on in the pandemic?
Yeah, so they did that. Yeah, they looked at
They
looked at the overall trends. Yeah, and they did exactly some form of what you just said. They did that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting what you said. Yeah, exactly what Steve was implying, what you said, Kevin. If they did try to map their model to other types of viruses and see what happens. But, I mean, this is a pretty there's this team here, the COVID-19 forecasting team. This is what they do. So they've been doing. I'm sure Nydia probably knows some of these people in the part of this group. But
yeah. Some of them are actually in my own group at Fogarty.
Oh, there you go. So I figured you might know some of these people. So that's what they do. So they're pretty reliable from what I've seen,
Yes,
So
yes.
they do good work, yeah. But India, you might want to suggest what Kevin suggested and Steve would to them. Or maybe they're already working on other viruses and try to protect that too. I don't know. But yeah. But anyway, so
Right.
it's
I will.
yeah. But it's an interesting paper. I like it. So I just thought, I'll share with other folks. But it does give you some insight potentially what might come if people are worried about what different, like I would be, different trends. Yeah, so that was that paper. Some other recent. This has been a slow news week or paper week for me. Maybe I've been missing some papers that have been coming out. One thing is we know, again, actually one of my friends actually was talking to me yesterday about, what's the guidance of when should we get another booster shot, right? There's actually been a lack of guidance. So this was timely. That I just read this morning. An article that came out yesterday here. I guess the UK and Canada have already said, they're recommending people who are, high risk, like immunocompromised and stuff, to get a booster shot in the spring sometime. In the US, there's not much guidance, unfortunately. But, I mean, I would imagine from everything we know, if it's within the 6-month period of 8-month period that you haven't had it been boosted, it's probably might be wise to do it. But I guess this is my opinion. I don't know what others think, but there's basically no guidance. That's what some of my friends would ask me, should I get another boost? Should I get a 6th shot or not? I was like, well, I would think that might be a good idea, just like the yearly flu vaccine we do, but maybe every 6 months for this or 8 months. I don't know.
Right.
Others have more. Yeah, go ahead, Nadia.
Sorry. I was actually just talking about that issue that no guidance is there, but it's likely due for most people, right? Since we are
Right.
supposed to take it every 6 months, as you mentioned. So
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would think. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I don't want to give bad advice to
no,
people,
of course, yeah.
But I think every 6 months should be something that, people should consider. I think, Nadia, you agree with me then, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I guess the most recent thing I've read is that they might try to push a yearly, kind of just like the flu, push that yearly, even since there's a lot of vaccines. Yeah.
The thing is, I think they are trying to do that just out of convenience for vaccine deployment, not really. Yeah,
I agree.
because that's what's needed for COVID.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So I'm probably going to try to get my booster sometime in the spring. Mine will be about the 6th month around there. So I'm not high risk, but I might as well go and get one, right? So.
Do you know if they do like oh, hi everyone. I was just wondering, do you know if they do clinical trials for like the next application of the vaccine, or I know they do it to release the vaccine, right? To prove efficacy and safety.
Right.
But I don't know if they had this follow-up where they say, okay, let's try again randomized control trials for the patients who are getting the second time. And then for those that didn't get the second time, for those that never get the vaccine, like try to just do these randomized experiments of different scenarios, how does it affect? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for the flu vaccine, I don't think they just kind of just, they changed the variation of it, right, to accommodate the new variants. And I think they have for the new bivalent, they've run tests now. I guess maybe they haven't, from what I know, run a new clinical trial, but I think they've been testing, the efficacy and safety of it. I don't know if Nidia or other folks here have a little more insight for Diego's question.
Sorry about that. Could you please repeat the question?
I was just wondering if they follow up the release of the vaccine with further clinical trials, with further randomized control studies to show that applying a second and third booster does not change the profile of efficacy or safety, and does actually improve efficacy. So that was my question, because it is different when you do clinical trials, which is a more controlled scenario, versus just like I don't know how you call the other. Is it prospective study? Right. It's just an observational study what you can do when the population is just applying the second or third booster, but not really a proper clinical trial. So that was my question.
Mhm. I think there are several studies showing that increased number of boosters provides more protection against a variety of lineages, initially with Delta, but then also with Omicron. And even then, with the bivalent vaccines to the newer Omicron strains. So, yeah, I think there's data out there for that.
Yeah. I mean, there was a paper we went over last week or 2 weeks ago where they saw that it was probably 2 weeks ago, depending on the sequence of events that you were infected with the latest variants of Omicron, and when you got your bivalent booster, you'll get a longer immunity. So that one paper went over, it was a pretty large cohort in there, so it wasn't just a smaller patient population. But they said, let's say if you got your bivalent booster a month and before you let's say got infected with one of the new variants, either BA.5 or XBB, then you might have 8 months, or you do have probably up to 8 months of immunity there before it starts waning. So that was some studies that people are doing showing like the efficacies and how might, in combination with and without being infected, how these new boosters might benefit you.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. I just had this general question. I didn't know.
Yeah. No, it's good discussion.
So, Ashton,
yeah, go ahead, Ben.
well, in that vein, what's the general protocol for use of controls in these studies? In other words, people who don't receive the vaccine or a booster.
I mean, testing the efficacies you don't have that as a control, right? How are you going to test efficacy if you don't give a booster? So that's not a issue there.
Well, you got to track people who are not receiving a booster, so you have.
So in most studies, yes, there is if they want to do epidemiological studies, yes, they would have some. That doesn't answer Diego's question, but it's another thing where yes, in a lot of studies,
yeah, it's a different aspect. Thank you.
Yeah, they have controls where they'll compare, yes, if without vaccine, with vaccine, and then you just have to look at those papers and they'll show you. That's why you'll see usually the unvaccinated, of course, will have a much poorer response to everything, being infected, and that's why. And most papers will show that already. There's been pretty much accepted now. It's been many papers have shown, the unvaccinated is much poorer than any other population of vaccinated people.
Which is an issue in itself.
Yeah. So this paper here was actually brought to my attention by Kyle Hernandez, in the modeling group. So this is a nice paper talking about how the vaccines, it might, how let's say the immunity with the vaccine might impact, let's say, people who do have like autoimmune diseases, and how well the efficacy would be. This is kind of like Diego's question, maybe, saying, if you have an autoimmunity, how well you're still protected when you do get the vaccine versus the general population, which don't have autoimmunity type diseases, and say that. So overall, they looked at different conditions, and what they do see is that as you would expect in the normal, most individuals here, it would generate nice, robust, response for antibodies, when they're vaccinated. But the quality response is impaired by autoimmune patients, which probably might be expected because due to their immune suppression that they already have, it's going to lower the impact of the vaccine. But I mean, of course, it's much better for them to get it rather not get it. But this is kind of a nice study to look over that. One thing they said here, since we know this very small population of patients who do have the vaccine might get myocarditis. That part doesn't make any difference in that for autoimmune patients. And so it's overall just a paper going over that and talking about like the efficacy in autoimmune patients of the vaccines. And overall, yes, everyone should get the vaccine, but with autoimmune patients, as expected, their responses are a little altered due to their natural immunity differences that we have. So that was it for the basic COVID news, but long COVID news, again, it's been kind of a slow, long COVID news week too. I just put this Vox article here because if you wanted to point someone, it was a pretty nice article talking about what is known, what's not known. Every few weeks seems like to be a new, or kind of a news article summarizing it, which is always good to have. And if people wanted to know more information about what's the current state of long COVID, there's these articles here that you could point people to. This is a case report here. I saw this, which was interesting. N of 1, right? Case report. Where basically they followed this. You can read the abstract while I'm talking. But they followed this woman here who got COVID back in 2020, and then she had developed long COVID. And what happened is basically she developed this prosopagnosia, which is basically the lack of familiarity to recognize people's faces, which is and basically in the article they talk about another impact of the neuro of the CNS issues that people get, and neuropsychological kind of issues that long COVID might induce. So they did a pretty comprehensive study on this woman here, and basically over time she started not being able to recognize differences in people's faces. But with objects, I think she could see differences in objects and have object recognition like cars and things like that. But that was interesting. Again, a case report, so I don't know how many or high of an impact this has on the long COVID population, but that's something. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Did she display any pre-existing neuropsychiatric conditions before expressing prosopagnosia?
I don't think so. I skimmed through the article, so I might have missed it if she did, but I don't think so.
Okay, I'll look through it here, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she had any other
So
preconditions.
what journal was that published in?
Cortex. I never heard that journal.
Okay, Cortex. Okay.
Yeah. I'll share the slides with folks too, so you'll see the link in there once you get it. So yeah. But it was an interesting case report. But I've never heard of this happen yet for long COVID yet. But of course, there's a lot of things happening that we don't hear about. This was an article. I think it came out also not this past week, but other ones. But take this with a grain of salt because it's not a published work. It's a conference proceeding. So I'm going to put those caveats before I talk about it. So we have to wait for actually the paper to be submitted and stuff. But I guess people are paying attention to these conference proceedings that are being published from this conference, from the European Congress of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases. That's occurring in April. But what they had talked about in this abstract that people have read, that now people in the news are talking about it, is saying that, and I talked about this last week too, talking about the impact of long COVID with Omicron. And what they're showing in this study is that basically Omicron seems to be reducing the rate of long COVID. So this is just one of the major findings in their abstract, saying that health workers, they looked at a large health worker population who had their first infection with Omicron and no previous prior infections, are no more likely to report long COVID than those who never had COVID-19. That's a pretty big claim to make, but that's what the claim they're making, as opposed to when they compare it to the health workers that from the original, they're calling the wild type virus, the Washington variant, and the original one that back in 2020, they were up 67% more likely to report symptoms for long COVID to the control population, basically people who never had COVID. So that's a 60%, 67% seems pretty high, but that's what they're reporting. But anyway, so this is just take it with a grain of salt. But it was an interesting thing, I guess, when people are going to this conference. Maybe you had a chance to, or I guess we'll have to wait for their publication to come out to actually read it.
Did they report their N?
Yeah, and I forget what it is. Might have been. Yeah, I forget what it is. It was a fairly good N, but that doesn't actually.
Yeah, it still may be a sample bias, but I was just curious. So.
I could tell you right now, because that's an important question. Yeah, the N didn't seem to be too problematic, but I'll look it up right now. I'll tell you in a second.
I am wondering, is there a clear way to diagnose long COVID already? Do we have biomarkers that are, let's say, approved by health authority?
Yeah, that's the main issue. There's no biomarker at all.
Right.
So that's why, like, for example, the microRNA that I've been looking at could potentially be one, or mitochondrial type things. So that's the biggest issue, right? How do you define long COVID? So there's a whole list of symptoms that's almost like everything under the sun could be related to long COVID at some points, and that's the difficulty.
Yeah, exactly. But that can also bias this result, right? Sorry.
Yeah, sure, definitely can.
One study found
So
my
it's-
favorite subject about electrolytes. 6 months prior, they had low electrolytes, hyponatremia, hypochloremia, hypokalemia.
Yeah. So to Kevin's question,
We're finding that people are benefiting from increased electrolytes across the board.
Really?
and that
Oh
could be
yeah,
related
yeah,
to
yeah.
mitochondrial dysfunction too. So
That's good news because those are easy to administer.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
mean, if only someone would actually like put in a protocol, that would be helpful. Right now, it's just sort of, rumor flying between patients of how to deal with it, and that if you have POTS, increase your electrolytes, it'll help a lot.
Gotcha.
things like that there has to be more studies done, important studies to do, but it has to be done.
Exactly. Right. I mean, we just need the studies, and we know that it works. It's just,
Right.
we need to turn it into a protocol. And actually, you saw I connected you with NIH on biospecimens.
Yeah, I replied back to them this morning. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate
Okay.
it. Yeah, that was
And
good.
and
Yeah,
by the way, I spoke with Ryan. I spoke Ravi Ganesh yesterday. At Mayo, and he says they have tons of biospecimens. They have more than they know what to do with, and NIH doesn't even want them, even though Mayo is housing the biorepository. He's like, we could walk it over if we want 500 right now if we wanted to. So I would recommend, rather than going through NIH, at the rate NIH, I'll put a Twitter thread in that I posted this week about NIH into the chat for you all to see about what's going on over there. So I wouldn't hold your breath with them, and I would go directly to Ravi
That's a good suggestion. Yeah.
and see if you can do it directly with him.
No, that's a good idea. Yeah,
Because
definitely. I'll circle back with that. Yeah.
yeah, at the rate what I'm seeing at the NIH, you'd be lucky if you get this in our lifetime.
Yeah. We'll circle back offline to that. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think people would be interested to collaborate with.
I was just going to ask Afshin if you know the spectrum of the type of biospecimens they have. I would assume as most of it is either whole blood or PBMCs. Or I'm just curious if we requested. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I know. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't ask. I don't know.
I could email them.
Yeah, Ashwin, I put them in touch so that they could have the direct conversation. I didn't want to be the poor translator in the middle.
Yeah. No, it's okay. And I know that one grant we had submitted, which we didn't get. In that grant, for Steve's sake, we were talking about serum, but I think they had more. They had PBMCs and whole blood. They had a lot back then. I mean, now it sounds like they probably have tons more. So yeah,
No. NIH does not have that much.
No, I'm talking about Ravi. I'm talking about.
Oh
Ravi.
yeah, Ravi, yeah.
That'd be great if they had that spectrum and you had an N value for each of those different things, because that would help you apply your biomarkers and what source you can. Oh, that'd be great.
I'm going to put this Twitter thread in the chat, and you'll see why I'm saying that not to wait on the NIH.
Sure. No.
So
Kevin's
how
question,
accessible?
sorry, just before you start, Kevin, your question of N for this study, there was 157 healthcare workers for the first group here, and the second group was 429. So it's it's decent numbers, but not
decent. But there still could be a sampling bias. But so
sure.
With the Mayo data, how accessible would be ancillary data like imaging data, that sort of thing, with the biosamples?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Diana knows. I don't know that, but maybe people could send me email with all the questions, and then I could email.
Okay, because that's also been a problem with NIH. It's really difficult to get imaging data right now, and has been for a while. So,
but yeah, that's a good idea. That maybe Kevin and other folks email me like a list of things, and then as Diana started mentioning here, that's I could email Ravi, and since Dinah, you just spoke to them recently, I bet
Yeah,
stuff in the
we literally just had this conversation yesterday
Okay,
because I'm
perfect.
basically busy trying to blow up the entire NIH Recover program right now in the media, and Robbie's helping me because he's on the side of good,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he
sure.
is, as evidenced by the side that he's on the side of good, is furious at the inefficiency that they didn't even want his bios. He's like, I have 500 that I could walk over right now. we house it. Like he was just, livid. But as to specifics, I leave to Afshin to sort out.
Yeah, yeah. No,
That's
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 great. I'll
that's
send
that's
him.
beyond my scope.
No, no, thanks for bringing it up. I'll email him because I think there might be several people in our group that would be interested in collaborating with him.
Yeah, I mean, and please,
And look
and
at that.
and if you could just pass around the information from the direct information from the NIH, or I can forward the email that gave the
Yeah, 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 yeah.
instructions. I just wouldn't advise anyone to
Right.
bank on that
Just to
happening.
give it a little background, they said in April they're making the digital portal available. So, and a request like to make the as Diana forwarded me. So, but yeah, it sounds like if you have other avenues to get easier tissue access, it's always better.
Yeah, every date that the NIH has given, not one date has been met yet. The
Right.
registry was supposed to be launched this past December. It's on permanent pause right now. Clinical trials were supposed to have started this past December. The protocols have not yet been written. The sites for the
Mhm.
clinical trials have not yet been chosen. I mean, that all of their dates are way off. I wouldn't listen to any of them.
Yeah, unfortunate, but we'll find a way for getting better samples with your
Yeah, I think that I think that
collaborator maybe. Yeah.
I think Robbie. I think going with Ryan and Robbie is a far better plan.
Yeah, I'll email them later today. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's great. We could probably definitely find some
Can
use,
you
some people.
can you just keep me in the loop on? Can you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
keep me in the loop on that conversation?
Yep,
Thanks.
yep. I'll CC you. No problem. Okay, that was it for some of the news. But let me just go. The variant distribution, what's happening? Not much surprise here. XBB.1.1.5. Sorry, dot one dot. XBB.1.5 is the prominent cases around the states. Most places in the world it's taken over too. But so we see with the wastewater data in the states, it's still steadily declining down on average, no matter what region you're at. And of course, when they look at the variant, it's XBB is the one that's pretty much pretty much close to 100% everywhere. Um, Looking at just my county where I live, Middlesex, there's a little peak going back up, but maybe they're predicting the trend should be keep going back down. But we'll see next week what happens. Again, the variance in the U.S. not surprising. In the East Coast side, it was mainly XBB.1.5 that took over, and then slowly, well, not so slowly, but the rest of the U.S. states were catching up with that, as you see here. There's other variants, of course, in circulation, but they're very low numbers and not out competing this main one. And as we pointed out in that one modeling paper, prediction paper, forecasting, if this trend continues and there's no new variants popping up by June or May, it should be steady for deaths and new cases. But as Nadia pointed out, other folks, we'll see what happens. Maybe new variants can always pop up. This is the overall same trends everywhere, but at least not look at this big mess here, but look at more of a macro level view. Cases again are not as reliable anywhere these days. So because of the lack of reporting, places shutting down their surveillance programs, unfortunately. So let's say hospital admissions are probably better, or ICU, patient ICU, and deaths might not be as reliable to look at COVID cases because thankfully for the vaccines and maybe because of the new variants and Omicron that the deaths have been greatly reduced when you're infected. So that's a good thing. But hospital admissions might be a better cue of what's happening. But again, new cases are supposedly in France are zero. But again, maybe it's probably lack of reporting, as our in informal conversation earlier when we're waiting. Steve, you pointed out the virus is circulating still, and people are getting infected. But the case numbers don't really report that. Same thing, in Europe, you see, but Germany had their little spike here, but it's going back down. Maybe this is indicating that they're getting a little peak going happen again, but again, it's overall low. The thing that we talked about last week, most of these cases, this was the Omicron wave that happened. A lot of, we're now pre-Omicron levels, I guess you could call it, where we're heading towards and staying steadily right now. U.S. same thing, South American countries same thing, but again, could be lack of reporting. And Japan had that huge spike here, for the last variant of Omicron that hit them, but now cases, deaths, and ICUs are all going back down. So, I mean, overall, this probably is good news. I want to remain optimistic, but you got to be cautiously optimistic, as we know, because the case reporting isn't being as accurate as it was.